hygiene is important. You gotta take care of yourself, and old video games are no exception. I mean, have you seen what some used games look like nowadays? Sometimes when you come across a dirty cartridge or disc, you gotta do what you have to do. Wait, now whenever a new media format is released, the cleaning kit for said format is sure to follow. VHS tapes, CDs, and of course floppy disks. So it probably comes as both a no-brainer and a surprise that the Famicom Disk System would get its own cleaning kits. I say surprise because these things are definitely not as well known outside Japan, though the NES did also get its own official cleaning kit. Today's things of interest is all about the FDS though, so let's bust these two things out and see if they still work today. Spoilers, there's gonna be a few caveats. First off, we have the Famicom Disk System Head Cleaning Card. This is basically the FDS's equivalent to those floppy disk drive cleaners. As you can see, it normally comes with the disc and a bottle of cleaning spray to go with it. But unfortunately, that is technically flammable liquid, which means I couldn't ship it out of Japan where I bought it from, and so it's kinda stuck there with someone else. I wonder what's up with it right now. Anyway, the old manual aside, this here is the FDS Head Cleaning Card. I think I'm in love. Seeing a picture of this disc for the first time is basically what prompted me to seek it out. It's the coolest looking Famicom disc that's not actually a disc. Makes me wonder if there could have been a functional disc with a translucent shell, but I guess that would be too ahead of its time. Anyway, as you can clearly see, this cleaning disc uses a cloth-like surface to clean the read head inside of the disk system, in a similar fashion to other regular floppy disk cleaners from the time period. On the other side, you have 3 holes to apply the head cleaning spray onto. As I said, the cleaning spray is kinda stuck in Japan, so for my demonstration, regular rubbing alcohol will have to do. Though I imagine in terms of ingredients, the cleaning spray isn't too far off from rubbing alcohol anyway. I added in what's probably a bit more alcohol than expected, but I wanted to try and get it nicely distributed throughout the whole thing. And with that done, all you have to do is just turn on the disk system and stick the disc in. And there you go. Obviously it just errors out after the job is done. It's sadly not the type of freaky cleaning disc that actually has weird data on it. Well, I currently do not have a dirty disk drive, so I can't really test how effective this card is at actually cleaning the drive head. But I can at least confirm that it still manages to read my copy of Zelda 1 afterwards, so that's gonna mean something, right? Either way, even if it's not as practical for me as the other two we're looking at today, this is still one heck of a neat collectible. Up next, we have the Famicom Disk System Card Cleaner. Instead of cleaning the drive, this one's for cleaning your disk cards, and there's probably way more valid reasons for why you'd want to do that. Most Famicom discs notoriously did not have any kind of shutter for protection, so aside from the waxed leaf that each disc was packed in, you very much don't want to leave them exposed. And when you throw in used discs and even bootlegs into the picture, there's a higher chance of you coming across a disc that's in less than ideal condition. I've actually had bootleg discs mess up the calibration in my own disk drive once, so it's become vital for me to actually check every new disc I buy before sticking it in the drive. And of course, having a specialized tool to clean these discs in an easy way would be useful as well. So here's what we got in here, the card cleaner itself and an included cleaning cartridge that houses a long strip of cleaning material. I was already under the expectation that this could already be heavily used by the time I bought this, but what I did not expect was this. Turns out it's been sitting for so long that the cleaning material has quite literally crumbled into pieces, and trying to move the strip around does not exactly yield the best results. Yeah, this thing is unusable. Whatever's left that hasn't crumbled to pieces on my desk is basically sandpaper, and I'm not about to find out what happens if I actually use this on a disc. Nintendo has sold replacement cleaning cartridges in the past, but I wager that those are even harder to come by than the card cleaner itself. And who knows if any new old stock that still exists also suffers from the same crumbling problem. So I ended up having to improvise, adapt, and overcome. I realized that these alcohol pads I had lying around for cleaning purposes are just the right size to fit onto the indent here, and it still closes perfectly when you put a disc in it. So you can just close it up and give the disc a few spins while the pad cleans the inside of the disc. And looking at the disc afterwards, yes, that appears to be sufficiently cleaned. Just have to give it a few more manual spins myself to let the alcohol dry out in there. Now, this Zelda disc wasn't previously unreadable in any way, so it's not really the greatest test of its capabilities. But in order to give a better test, I have here 3 completely untested bootleg Famicom discs straight from a local retro game store. These have probably been sitting on a shelf for a long time, and I am not confident about sticking uncleaned discs directly into my disk drive. So let's see if the card cleaner can help with things. First off is the standard unlabeled yellow disc made by Niniend. It even says that on the disc sleeve, which is kinda funny. The reason I picked this disc is because there were some noticeable dirty bits on the disc media itself, and I wanted to see if the cleaner could get them off. The second disc comes in this interesting looking case. It's a purple disc and it looks pretty dang different to a lot of the other bootleg discs I've come across before, enough for me to want to pick it up. The label there says Winter Olympics in Chinese, so this is presumably a copy of Winter Games, which was a very terribly received port of the Commodore 64 sports game. And lastly, we have this blue disc, which says Intend on the case. Okay. And on the disc itself, there's a... While I will also be cleaning this disc, I have a feeling that we won't be able to get any bootable game data off of it based on what's written on the label here. But I'll explain that when we get there. These latter 2 discs don't have a lot of visible dirt or scratches on their disc media, but let's see what the card cleaner can do with them. With the alcohol pad prepared, in goes the yellow disc. Squeaky noises aside, it did seem to be working just fine. I may have spun it a few more times than necessary, which kind of made it a bit of a mess to dry. But at a glance, the speck of dirt that used to be visible on the disc doesn't seem to be as apparent anymore. Next up is the purple disc, and that's not a good sign, the thing got stuck. Somehow the card cleaner caused the disc media itself to get stuck in position. And after fiddling with it a bit, that's not good. Some sort of protective sleeve within the disc itself must have gotten loose from all that cleaning, which I guess considering the build quality of some of these bootlegs shouldn't have been surprising at all. I doubt this could ever happen with an official disc. I'm not sure if this disc will work at the moment, so we'll just set it aside for now. And finally we have the blue disc, which was able to be cleaned without any issues. As you can see, there were some tiny specks of dirt left over on the alcohol pad after the fact, but nothing too major. Now, even though I've cleaned these discs pretty thoroughly, I'm still not super confident about the possibility of booting them up directly. Since with how bootleg discs are written on modded disk drives with potentially different calibrations, even though my disk drive can run official games no problem, it's unlikely that the BIOS can just read a bootleg disc from the get-go, unless I rewrite the disc with my own disk drive. But there is this neat little homebrew program for the disk system that can read disks outside of the BIOS routine and list their contents with a fair amount of success, so I'll be using that first with these disks. First one to go in is the yellow disc, but right as I was fiddling with it further, I noticed this thing coming out from the disc itself. Floppy disk experts are probably pointing at the screen right now going, "Oh, that's the paper they stick onto the inside of the disc that protects the media as it spins," but I will not know that until writing the script. I try not paying it any mind and put side A in. It errored, and now the disc looks like this. Great start. I was still curious to see if it could read the seemingly fine B side though, so I did what I probably shouldn't have done given the circumstances, but it worked. There it is, this disc has Bubble Bobble on it apparently. Now given that the other side of the disc looked like that, I was hesitant to test it out any further. So I moved on to the blue disc, and if my intuitions are correct, yes! You can see from the disk info here that this disc only contains 2 files named 1990 HKG, and it claims to be side F of disk number 5. What is going on here?
And now, a super quick tangent with Akfamilyhome.
This is a game doctor. They come in many varieties and their purpose is to convert Famicom cartridge games into a format that can be written to Famicom disks instead. Of course, this doesn't support every game out there because mappers, larger games will have to take up quite a few disks and specialized hardware is required to read the data back from the disk. Why go through all these hoops to dump a cartridge into a floppy disk? Why piracy, of course! Welcome to Hong Kong. So yeah, the scribbles on the disc label implies that this is a Dragon Ball game of some sort. But the FG on the side signifies that this is side F and G of a cartridge dump. And while the disk lister can't detect the files, it is obviously not compatible with a stock system. I did try dumping the data on it later on and appears to just consist of graphics data, which looks like a Dragon Ball game alright. I tried to find out which one specifically, but turns out there's like a bajillion Dragon Ball games on the Famicom, so I'll leave this as an exercise for you guys. Well, time for the purple disc. It's still a little bit stuck on the inside, but I tried my best to reseat everything right. Let's hope for the best. It worked. Side A of Winter Games by Pony Canyon. At this point, I was so bamboozled by it reading correctly that I immediately had to reset the system and see if the BIOS could load it. And it was slightly too wishful thinking. As I expected, it came close to reading it, but something about the disk definitely threw the system off. Like I said, when your system has been fine-tuned to read official games perfectly, you can't expect bootlegs to work out of the gate. At this point, I took the disk out, and to my surprise, whatever was gumming up the disk media on the inside was suddenly just allowing it to freely move and spin again. I have expected the worst case of the disk messing up my drive, not the literal opposite effect. I'm sure the floppy disk experts in the comments will have a suitable explanation for this. With the disk seemingly fixed, I popped in side B, and once again, the contents were read properly by the disk lister program. And with that done, we have two identified but unbootable disks, and this yellow disk with the inner protective lining still sticking out. You know what, screw it, let's just pull that out. I don't think doing that will positively impact the longevity of this disk, but we'll see. Putting side A back into the disk lister, and it's identified correctly as Bubble Bobble with all the files listed. Unfortunately, trying to actually boot the disk sends me back to the dreaded error 27 once again. Still, I think having a disk lister recognize the files on the disk is probably the best expected outcome out of this, so I'm not complaining. And my disk drive still boots official disks after the fact, so at least nothing got messed up afterwards. Now, most of the hiccups I encountered during this whole process could be chalked up to the reliability, or lack thereof, of the bootleg discs themselves. But if some of you wanted a more effective demonstration, I do have another example that I unfortunately only got photos of. I got my hands on another bootleg disc a while ago that had the B side readable but not the A side. I assumed it was another calibration issue at first, but even when I manually tried to rewrite the disc myself, I was just given an error whenever I read the files back. So I decided to plop it into the card cleaner, and this time around it actually managed to clean a bit more dirt off of the disk surface compared to the previous discs. And in fact, it started reading properly again after being cleaned. I really wish I got the whole process on camera, but it was still very cool to see it working as intended, even if the original cleaning material has long since disintegrated. And with that, that's the Famicom Disk System Cleaning Disk and Card Cleaner. These are accessories that other conventional floppy disk formats pretty much also have, but it's just neat to see Nintendo's own version of them. And now these have become both nifty collectibles as well as tools that surprisingly still have practical use today, given the fragile nature of Famicom disks. It's been a while since I first got my own disk system to mess with back in 2018. And while fixing things and getting them to work properly can sometimes be a pain, it's very rewarding to see these little floppy disks still chugging on and being able to rewrite them with new content even after all these years. And as a certain lazy game reviewer once said, the hardships that come with getting this old technology to work is what makes them special. I may not be a retro computer nut or even born during that era, but it's still neat that I'm able to partake in a part of the history of this old storage format through the Famicom. Now, if only Nintendo remembers this, kun. You let people use the disk writer as an icon for the Switch, but not him. You guys literally had one job.